This video is just going to go through some keys for you in regards to equations. So it's kind of a one to catch up. Make sure you have some of the simple things to do. Make sure they're a little easier to look for and to make the problems a lot easier as you go through this year and the rest of your algebra math career. So let's start out with the first one. And this is the key part here of what numbers are attached to the variables. So if they're with the variables, meaning that they're multiplied or divided to them, we call them coefficients. If they're added or subtracted, we call them constants, because they're at the end of the problem. For 2, know how the numbers are attached to the variables. So in this case, we have multiplication. In this case, we have division, addition, and subtraction. So there's different ways that you can show this. These are the basics. Third one is know the opposite operation to move the number from the variable to the other side of the equal sign. And you have to do both sides. So you have positive to negative, negative to positive, multiplying, dividing, dividing, multiplying. Must show the operation of the number to both sides. So if you're adding, you have to show addition to both sides. You'll see that in the examples. It's easier to complete going down the paper than it is going left to right. So if we can go vertical rather than horizontal, it'll make it a lot easier to work with. And remember, you're always working backwards in an equation to get x all by itself. Now, so some special cases that you're going to run into, you may have to use the distributive property first, which leads into you may have to have like terms, or you may find like terms. If you're working with fractions, you may have to have or find a common denominator. And if you have a fraction attached to your letter, you have to multiply by the reciprocal. The bottom line of this whole thing with any equation is you need to show all of your work. So here are some examples to show you some of the steps as you go through them. When you multiply, or when you're addition or subtraction, kind of the same, a little bit easier. Again, you have to show the addition or subtraction. In this case, it's subtraction. You have to show that to both sides. With your 2-step, we have to make sure that we're doing the first step of getting rid of what's attached to addition subtraction first, doing that to both sides. Second step is our division, or we may be multiplying by the reciprocal. With distributive property, you may end up with having to distribute first. Actually, you're going to have to distribute first for this problem to work, and go through the steps similar to what we did on the other one. So if we have just the like terms, no parentheses, we're going to again look for the letters being identical and our consonants. Combine those and we filter through the steps that we've gone through in those problems. A few other ones, like terms and distributive property put together. So again, we have problems that have 2 processes in the same steps. So we're going to take care of the distributive property first, get rid of our parentheses, get into our like terms, which I've identified, and then simply get into solving the problem. And sometimes it actually ends up being only a 1-step problem that you have to worry about. Fractions, Again, any fraction we're going to leave as improper if it comes out that way. So again, in this step we have to find a common denominator. So again, you have to work with fractions. Multiplying by the reciprocal gets you that fraction off of the letter, so we can solve it for the letter x. So if we have fractions with the distributive property, which will probably be one of the most involved ones that you'll do, again, you have to take time to work through it. So you're going to have a multiplication problem here in the second part of the distributive, which is going to reduce down hopefully to a whole number, but again, it could reduce down to a fraction. Again, that's where the variety of this comes into play. So again, we get to like terms once we're done with our parentheses. So we have our fractions, which down here shows that we have to find a common denominator. That puts it back into the problem. Again, we have a two-step process. Get rid of the 2, and then we're going to multiply by the reciprocal here, multiply by the reciprocal on this side as well. But because this is a negative, we want to multiply it by a negative as well, which we have to carry the negative over here. That gives us our positive, which is what we want on our x. And then we simply reduce, if we can, to get our answer. Please be careful of your signs. Last thing are just keys. Some big things to remember. Again, if you have equations, look for distributive property first. Once you're out of the parentheses, then we look for like terms. If it does have parentheses, but there's no number on the outside of the parentheses, that means that there's no distributive property. We need to look for simplifying our signs, because there may be 2 signs in front of the number, or you have like terms right off the bat. Always get rid of, move the number that is added or subtracted first, and then multiply or divide if it's a 2-step equation. Read the equation. Don't just jump in and think, well, this is what I got to do first. That's not going to be always the case. So read the question first. That tells you what you are going to get, what you're given, and how you're going to move it, and what you're going to do to move it. And remember, the thing that you're always doing in equations is you're always working backwards. So you're adding and subtracting first, multiplying, dividing second. Be careful of your signs.